So we are here for another day of wrestling news, and we start with a lot of news coming back from AEW Dynamite, starting with the returns, quote unquote, of both Miro and Thunder Rosa as both long-standing employees who have been, I guess, non-existent would be the best way to put it, non-existent on AEW programming over the last couple of months. Actually appeared on Dynamite last night with backstage segments with Renee Paquette, or in backstage segments with Renee Paquette, and that led to questions of what happens next. But Thunder Rosa did say she was meeting with Tony Khan. Miro did also ignore Renee Paquette's line of questioning, so it's unclear what is next for Miro, but it is very likely that the returns of both Miro and Thunder Rosa, it is not coincidental that it is getting closer to AEW Collision in the month of June, so it is very likely that their returns have something to do with the event coming up next month. Speaking of the event coming up next month, a marquee match is planned for AEW Collision and its first debut edition on June 17th from Regina, California. From Regina, Canada. And also, CM Punk wants a major match for his return on Collision. And, a few names have been spoken about. But the question is, the reality of this situation is, it is unclear who could be in the match with CM Punk, but some possibilities are fascinating as far as who could possibly be a part of those matches. It could be former rivals like Bryan Danielson or Samoa Joe, as both the Samoan Submission Machine and the American Dragon are under contract in some form or fashion to AEW, with Bryan Danielson a part of the BCC and Samoa Joe a part of Ring of Honor. But if there's any long-standing independent rivalry that a lot of people never got to see another revisit of, it's Joe versus CM Punk, as those two tore down the house before Punk joined WWE in 2006 or 2005. They tore down the house with a trifecta of matches, selling out Ring of Honor all over, and putting a very bright spotlight on Punk before he made the jump to WWE. So I would love to see I would love to see Punk have something going on before Chris Jericho, but Bryan Danielson or Samoa Joe, Bryan Danielson and Samoa Joe would both be extremely good potential opponents for CM Punk. And if you want to go a little bit further, there's a strong likelihood now that Ring of Honor will likely take the place of being a feeder system, sort of, for AEW, and will be the place where lesser-known independent talent get the opportunity to shine, which is where Dark and Elevation were before they got canceled. Their spot was, it's what their spot was before they got canceled, but also to a degree, I think at this point Ring of Honor will become sort of a feeder system for AEW, which is something that a lot of secondary companies to WWE never understood the benefit of having a feeder system or a secondary territory to send talent to, like WWE has had for probably close to 30 years at this point. Going back to Smoky Mountain Wrestling, Memphis, in Memphis, and HWA and DSW and OVW and, so on and so forth, I think they didn't officially have a developmental until I don't think they had an official developmental until OVW was their developmental, but they've had feeder systems before. Impact Wrestling had a OVW for a time, but it never really lived up to the expectation that it did with WWE. But either way, Ring of Honor being a feeder system for AEW would extremely benefit that promotion. And also, a fresh roster approach is expected for Collision. I don't know what that necessarily means. I mean, in my opinion, what it could mean is basically a fresh roster approach being that they want to have, they're gonna have, like, maybe talent exclusively on one show, but not a draft or a brand split. But what I've been saying with Dynamite and Rampage, like if you have Orange Cassidy weekly on Rampage, so people know you're gonna see Orange Cassidy on this brand, but you're not gonna see him on the other, or you're more likely to see him on one as opposed to the other, it would make those people who want to see Orange Cassidy more likely to watch the brand where Orange Cassidy is going to be, if that makes sense. But if you got CM Punk, and he's going to weekly be on Collision, more likely than weekly be on Dynamite, it makes it where you're more likely to have it where people are going to watch Dynamite. I mean, people are going to watch Rampage to see. I mean, Collision, I know I'd get there eventually. People would watch Collision to see CM Punk as opposed to watching Dynamite to see CM Punk if Punk is not going to be on Dynamite. You know what I mean? And that's what I've been saying that they should have with Rampage, like a soft brand split where the expectation is underused talent will be used on the new brand as opposed to the other one. But that's just, again, my opinion or my interpretation of the story, because I mean, do I know what the marquee match planned for Collision is? Or the expectation for Collision is, rather? No, I don't. They had an expectation for Rampage, and to say that the show did not live up to expectations would probably be an understatement. It did not live up to expectations. Anywhere close to expectations. But to say what a marquee match could be for Collision, I think it could be something similar to what we saw last night on Dynamite with Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley. But with that being said, could it be would a marquee match include Miro? Could a marquee match include the return of Thunder Rosa? Would it need to include somebody like Will Ospreay or Okada? I think they got a lot to figure out, especially if they're going to be using Ring of Honor as a feeder system. They got a lot to figure out between now and when Collision comes in next month, which Tony Khan did reference a big announcement coming next week, and I can basically decidedly tell you that the announcement that Tony Khan was referring to was the reinvention of the media rights deal, or the announcement of the media rights deal for AEW, sticking with Warner Brothers and the official announcement of the arrival of AEW Collision. With that being said, though, that is it for this news video, and we will actually have another one coming up right after this.